Good morning, campers. The other day, somebody on Twitter named Sopai Pig Lobo, that's his Twitter name, sent me a video that was quite interesting. It was called Your Brain Hallucinates Conscious Reality by Anil Seth. It's a TED Talk. The premise of the video is the idea that the brain hallucinates conscious reality. That conscious reality and hallucination are not two different things. Now, in Buddhism, we don't really go there. Well, let's see where we go. As I've often said, the Zen form of Buddhism is non-dogmatic, which means whatever you come up with out of your particular meditation experience is valid in its own right. But there are some commonalities which Zen people discuss among themselves, and we often find that there's a large agreement. And one of the large areas of agreement is that there is a difference between a hallucination and reality, but that the difference is perhaps not that reality is real and the hallucination is unreal. It's something a little grayer than that. One of the things that Mr. Seth says in this video, he says that the brain, being an organ that's locked inside this lump of bone here, can't see or hear or feel anything. So it takes the input from the senses and makes its best guess as to what's out there. And that when we share and agree upon a certain kind of hallucination as human beings, we call that reality. Which I think is a good definition, or a good working partial definition of reality in the Buddhist sense. That reality is an agreed upon construct. And not all of us agree in all the particulars, but in a large measure, we agree. You know, you can go, "Look out, there's a bus!" And the guy jumps out of the way, and he doesn't get hit by the bus, and everybody is saved, because we've all agreed upon the basic framework we're dealing with here. You may not agree with the political opinions that the people have on that bus, or maybe the reasons the bus driver is doing what he's doing, or the name of the street. I don't know, but you agree on the basic overall things, and we can safely refer to that area of agreement as reality. But reality is also something different. My teacher Gudo Nishijima used to say, we're not living in the world of perceptions, we're not living in the world of thoughts and ideas, but we are living in reality. And we have perceptions of reality, and we have thoughts and ideas of reality, but reality itself may remain untouchable by us, or unperceivable. We can't perceive it, not exactly, and we can't think about it. Well, we can think about it, but our thoughts are always limited by our perceptions and by other factors. So even our thoughts about reality are not perfectly trustworthy. This is what we call in Buddhism, or there's a kind of a long-standing tradition of calling this great doubt. So great doubt isn't just, I doubt that Trump has our best interests in heart, or I doubt that, I don't know, whatever you might doubt. It's bigger than that. It's I doubt that this existence that I'm thinking I live in, or that I'm perceiving that I live in, is the actual thing. So the actual thing might be different from even the best guess I have at it. This would impact science, too. One of the things, as you guys know who've been watching me, I'm a big science fiction nerd, and I like to think about aliens, and, I think it's a side project of mine. I don't think it's a major thing. But, I do tend to believe that there must be something similar to us out there in the universe, and that maybe one day we'll have contact with some of the other things that are experiencing the world in a somewhat similar fashion to us who live on other planets. One of the factors that may be involved in coming to do this, to communicate with these creatures, whatever they are, would be to start to get closer to a perception of the real world. And every generation, I was going to say just but every generation thinks it has the market cornered on what reality is. But when we look back at the past, we see that people had different ideas. One of the things Nishijima Roshi used to say that used to fascinate me was he would say that up until the Middle Ages, people were living generally, in broad strokes, were living in the world of the mind. But then during the Renaissance period, people discovered they had bodies. That's the way he always said it. And I found that really interesting, as if people didn't know they had bodies up until the Renaissance. Now, of course, that's a very broad statement, and I don't think even Nishijima Roshi meant that to be taken absolutely literally. But in a sense, if you look at some of what people in the past produced, it does seem like, at least for the European stream of civilization, that people might have been much less aware of the fact that they had bodies up until the Renaissance, and the fact that there was a material world, or something that we loosely refer to as the material world, out there. Now, one of the other ideas we have in Buddhism is that there is some kind of external world. This is something Nishijima used to insist upon. So a lot of philosophies get very, I think the word is solipsistic. I'm not real into philosophy jargon, but this idea that everything is just an idea, and that there's no corresponding reality out there. Buddhism tends to reject that. It tends to say there is a reality out there separate from my internal reality. Maybe not separate, but something that can be considered differently. Is that good enough? So it's not separate from your internal reality, but it can be kind of considered as a different thing because it has large differences. So there is an external world, but we only know the external world through the workings of our brains and bodies. And to the extent that our brains and bodies are a little off, we'll never know exactly what the external world is. Like, there's some cats who live next door to me, and those cats probably have a different understanding of the external world from my understanding. All of this kind of reminded me of something Dogen says, and I've referenced it in my book Don't Be a Jerk in a chapter called Buddhist Paperwork. The quote, and I'm going to read you my version, but I think my version is fairly close to the original. That night I stayed in another temple on my way back home, and I had a dream. This is Dogen speaking. In it, the master who had founded that temple showed up and handed me a bunch of plum blossoms. The blossoms were more than a foot wide. Those plum blossoms must have been udumbra flowers, the blossoms that are so rare that almost no one ever sees them. Maybe the state in a dream and the state in waking consciousness are equally real. Now, that line really blew my mind when I first heard it from Nishijima Roshi when he was lecturing about Shobo Genzo. Let me read it again. Maybe the state in a dream and the state in waking consciousness are equally real. Now, for years I kind of carried that around in my noggin or somewhere, and I wasn't sure where it came from. And I remember there were several times, and I write about it in this book, where I tried to find that quote again. And I'm looking there's a chapter called Muchu Setsumu, which means explaining a dream within a dream. And I thought, well, it must be in there, and it wasn't. And there's a couple other chapters that have stuff about dreams in them, and it wasn't in any of them. And I began to wonder if I actually dreamed this comment. And it wasn't until I started working on this book that I found it in the most unlikely place, which is a chapter Dogen writes about the certificate of succession within Buddhism. So you wouldn't think to look for it there. The actual quote, though, which I tracked down is, are you ready, Japanese fans of learning Japanese? Muchu to kakuchu to onajiku jinjitsu narubeshi. Which roughly translates to, let's see if we can translate this on the fly, Brad. Within a dream and within waking may be the same state, or maybe the same realness. Jinjitsu is a funny word. Jinjitsu usually means realness, something that's actually there rather than something you imagine. The Tanahashi translation has this line as, this dream was as real as being awake, so referring back to the dream he had of the plum blossoms. But if you actually look at the quote, it would be easy enough for Dogen to have said, Ano Muchu, or Ano Yume no Naka, whatever, something specifically referring to that particular dream, but he doesn't. It's a much broader statement, and placed where it is in the context, it's ambiguous. So it could mean dreams in general, or it could mean that specific dream. My belief is that Dogen was being intentionally ambiguous and trying to refer to a wider idea that dreams and waking reality might be equally real. Now, this doesn't mean that dreams and waking reality are the same. Dogen is pretty clear about that. In fact, one of the things he says often about people who don't understand things is they haven't even dreamed of whatever it is that they think they understand. And actually, this is a little point of annoyance with me. A lot of translators say they haven't even seen it in a dream, which makes it all sound oriental and stuff. But in Japanese, yume o miru, so you watch or see a dream. And in English, we say we had a dream. So to translate it into proper English in the proper way English is expressed would be to say you haven't even dreamed of the thing, rather than say you haven't even seen it in a dream. Sorry, little rant, little side rant. Thank you very much. So dreams are different from waking reality, obviously, but the brain is doing kind of the same thing. In the waking reality, it has full access to a lot of sensory input from the body, and from that it creates a hallucination, if we go with Mr. Seth's idea from the video, a hallucination of what that reality might be. In the dream state, eyes closed and senses kind of not exactly shut off, but kind of damped down a bit, the brain is still trying to make sense of the input that's coming into it, but it's not all there. But this doesn't mean that what we are seeing in a dream is absolutely unreal. It's just a different way of understanding reality, which is kind of a mind-blowing thing, especially if as I am, you got into Dogen after reading, like, well, you can't see them, but they're up there, just about every book Philip K. Dick ever wrote. And if you don't know Philip K. Dick, go watch Total Recall. Is probably a good one if you want to know this idea that I'm talking about. You can watch the movie Total Recall. It kind of gets into some of Dick's ideas about that. It's based on a short story that he wrote. I've only seen the Schwarzenegger version. I still haven't seen the remake. Maybe I should give the remake a chance. Anyway, that's my little sermon today. I thought that was an interesting video and an interesting way to look at things. If you like what you heard, you can donate via Patreon and PayPal, and all the information is below this video, so please do. That's how I make my living. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Bye. Sweet dreams.